Hey, Mike, if you could give yourself, the younger version of yourself, a piece of advice now, say, for example, like when you were a freshman in college, what advice would you give to your freshman self?
I think the first thing I would say is we should make sure and offer a trigger warning because the first thing I would say...
we might have cuss words, incoming cuss words.
We might have incoming cuss words. The first thing I think I'd say to my younger college-age self is to have some more fun. You don't, I mean, this is awful, but like you don't have to go to every single class every single night, right? Especially if you're doing good, if your grades are... where they need to be and all the rest of that, like enjoy this time, have some fun. I don't know. That's my advice. It's probably the opposite of what you're supposed to tell kids.
Right.
Go to class, work hard, all that. But I would say have a little bit more fun, Mike. You don't take yourself too seriously. And you're going to have a better experience that way. I don't know. What about you?
You were an Eagle Scout, weren't you?
I wasn't an Eagle Scout.
I knew it. I
was not. No, I wasn't.
I thought you were. Okay.
No, I wasn't. I never did any Boy Scouts at all.
Interesting.
But
okay.
I always was prepared.
Well, my advice to my freshman self, my college freshman self, we're talking like 30 something years ago. My advice would be the exact opposite of what you gave yours. Mine is go to damn class, Jake.
Go to damn class.
Go to damn class. I graduated. It took me, was it 12 semesters, I think, got a 2.6 GPA and ended up with the easiest Bachelor of Arts degree that they offered at the college I went to, university I went to. Like it was me and all the scholarship athletes in class. Like that was the place that the degree that they put, that I was in was the one that they put all the athletes in because they wanted to stay eligible.
Listen, Jake, I don't want to embrace cancel culture here, but I think you're really, really insulting athletes everywhere.
I know.
I'm not sure if I can listen to this podcast anymore with that flippant attitude towards the athletic class.
Well, what can I say?
I had a little bit of a different experience, but I imagine that we both learned a lot of valuable lessons.
Sure.
Not trying to live in the world of regret, but if I could go back to my younger self, I would say, Mike Slack, you don't have to graduate in 3.5 years. You can take the full 4 years, that extra semester. It's kind of like a victory lap, right? Have some fun.
Yep, absolutely. So that's actually what we're talking about today on the Talky podcast. We're talking about the advice that you would give your younger self. So like I just mentioned, you're listening to the Talky podcast where we talk about things that they're interesting to us. I'm Jake Fisher, my buddy Mike Slack on the other end of the line. Sometimes we talk about the topics that we know about, like sales and marketing and technology and business strategy, entrepreneurship related kind of business things. Sometimes we talk about things we don't know a damn thing about. And those sometimes can be a lot of fun. We're online at talkytalkypod.com and everywhere that the finest podcasts are consumed. We mentioned the trigger warning. There is an occasional cuss word. It does happen. It's not the center portion. It's not the focus or the central theme, but occasionally we say SHIT or DAMMIT or FK, or we say these things sometimes. And it's just part of the natural language because that's just how we talk,
Spelling out curse words is not how you talk. We're not having a podcast with your mother or some parental figure in your life.
I know, but that's just I'm shy. So my buddy Mike Slack, who's laughing right now, you can catch him on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Slack Mike. I'm on Twitter at Jake Fisher OFCL, as in Jake Fisher Official. That's where all the stodgy professional stuff goes.
Uh-huh.
So what are you drinking right now? This is always something like, are you drinking anything good?
I am trying to drink some like low calorie, like soda alternatives. And so I picked up these sparkling waters, this blackberry one. The brand that I got, I tried a different brand at my sister's house. It was fantastic. I loved it. This brand is absolutely disgusting. I can't stand it.
Okay. Well,
but I'm going to drink it nonetheless because I guess that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I'm guessing that that in 10 years, like the late career, 20 years, whatever, the late career Mike Slack would tell the right now Mike Slack, don't drink some things that you don't like. Don't drink that shit. That's what he would say. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you as an old man.
As an old man? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
All right.
About that. So the thing I've been into is actually, I just picked it up. It's Malbec. I really enjoy this kind of red wine. It's a Malbec, kind of It's not a Cabernet Sauvignon. It's it's not a Pinot Noir. It's literally the varietal is called a Malbec. And I am not a wine expert or a wine snob, but I've really enjoyed it. Picked up a kind of a really affordable value, really good value in this Barefoot brand, which I know is really popular. So that's what I'm sipping on.
Now, is it imported from France? Is it French Malbec, or is it American Malbec? I mean, if you don't know, that's fine.
No, it's a great question. And I honestly, like I say, I'm not a big, just really not an expert of that, but I can tell you to see the Barefoot Malbec, it's really inexpensive. I'm seeing it I think I paid $10 for it.
There you go.
It's and so
for 3 gallons, right?
Yes, this is no, gosh, no. It was a big bottle though. It was so this is the product description though. I'll tell you what it is. It's Barefoot Malbec is a plush red wine of epic proportions. Big juicy flavors of blackberry and currant set sail on a gorgeous gust of vanilla, caramel, and toasted oak.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, we're both having a blackberry infused a drink with blackberry ingredients. So that's good for our, omega-3s or something like that.
Whatever. I don't know. Yeah. If you say so.
Yeah.
I believe.
Are you reading anything interesting these days, Jake?
No, not really. No, I'm not.
Got it.
What about you?
I'm still listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmic Query.
I love the grass.
So the most interesting thing between last time and this time that they talked about, it was just like it's a short comment, but about the difference between dark matter and dark energy, which just wasn't part of my active knowledge base about the universe. I don't know. Did you know about dark matter versus dark energy, the difference between the two?
No idea.
So dark matter attracts and dark energy repels. And so in some ways they're the opposite. And even though they're both called, dark something, they're not necessarily related, right? It's not like the inverse. It's not like the same thing, but the inverse or whatever, right? Okay. There may be some relations, but people don't really know. But they just have this similar naming. And what's interesting, and I think if I'm getting this right, there's far more dark energy, something like 3.5 to 1, dark energy in the universe compared to dark matter. And if again, speaking about things we know a little bit about, but maybe we don't know a lot about, I believe that's why the universe is expanding, is because of the amount of dark energy that's out there that's repelling and pushing outward. So
I had no idea.
Yeah, there you go.
Is there any so dark energy, dark matter? Was there any talk of dark meat? The chicken dark meat, because I really like dark meat. That's something is it expanding or contracting? Do we know?
Yeah. You've probably heard of the Milky Way galaxy, but I believe that the Tyson chicken galaxy has quite a bit of that. So,
I bet.
There's I think billions upon billions.
Love it.
Of celestial poultry.
Celestial Poultry. That is going to be what I'm going to name my next band, my next rock band, Celestial Poultry. You nailed it.
Okay, fantastic. I hope they are very successul.
Hello, London. We are Celestial Poultry.
Watch our tiny wings and beaks.
All right. So the title or the topic today, what advice would you give to the younger version of yourself? And I thought you had a great idea in that we kind of go through time a little bit, kind of start with at the very beginning, or there at the beginning of kind of our youngest self.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting thinking about this is I think either we've talked about it before or I've thought about talking about it before. I think we've heard I've read about how Jeff Bezos talks about a regret minimization framework. And that's a key way he thinks about and makes decisions. What decision am I going to regret the least? Right. Okay. And so it's a really, from the way he talks about, a very healthy way to approach life. Right. And so talking about these things is not a way for me to, talk about all the things I regret, right? But when you think about advice you give to yourself, it's an opportunity to think about, well, how would I do that differently, right? And that's kind of the spirit of this for me is, okay, let's think about what did I do well, but what could have I done differently? Give me a different experience than maybe I have now. And so, I think about an elementary school, and I really had a really good elementary school life in many, many, many really fundamental ways, right? Lived in a good neighborhood, had a good home, stable family, good friends, all those kinds of things. Really, always a good student, and that was always really well supported and all those things. The one thing that I didn't do a whole lot of is I was not as much into like my artistic side or my creative side, right? I would do a little bit of drawing and doodling here and there, but not really into art. And I'll tell you the one thing that is a regret of mine that I would go back and I would talk to my younger self in elementary school, and I would say stick with piano. Number one thing is stick with piano. And I was good at piano. I did it through maybe 4th or 5th grade. And I quit piano for a really silly reason. I came home from piano lessons one day, and whether or not I was just thinking about this or like I conjured and made up a little bit of the story, but I came home and it looked like my older brother and all of his older friends were just dispersing from the most epic game of front yard football, right? All the kids were over, they were playing, they were having fun. I get in, I'm like, they're here, great. I'm gonna go play front yard football with all the older kids, and boom, they're gone, right? Yeah. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I just missed out on front yard football because I was at stinking piano lessons. And I think either that day or soon after, I was like, all right, I'm not gonna do piano anymore. And I really should have stuck with it. And you know, there's plenty of opportunities to play backyard football. There's other ways I could have addressed that, but I just thought, nope, I connected those two things. But sticking with and having that like musical part of my upbringing, like in a larger way, that's something I would have told my younger self.
Okay. Well, I think that's a really good piece of advice, because it's something that like you, and I think that's like it reminds me of like elementary school, like that age. And I'm thinking 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, like kind of in that range. You know, we're just generally speaking as a species, we're not really good about delaying gratification. You know, we're not, just generally speaking. And that's kind of what that sounds like, is that it's a kind of a normal thing. And I think there are definitely times where I would look back and some of the stuff advice I might give would be in that same vein. It's like, hey, you know, work really hard to not just be all about the right now. But I think it's really hard when you're a little kid, you know?
Well, that's interesting. And being all about the right now is in some ways the advice they give to grown-ups now, like be in the moment, be present.
Yeah, right.
But there's a difference between being present in the moment and, you know, being able to evaluate the things you want, the desires you have right now versus long-term, right? It kind of reminds me of the classic marshmallow experiment that they did with kids, right?
Yes.
You know,
can you explain that?
Yeah. So I think the experiment basically went somewhere along the lines of, you've got a room full of kids, you put one marshmallow in front of them, you tell them not to eat the marshmallow, whoever the leader of this experiment is, they leave the room. If you ate the marshmallow after the person left the room before they come back, you don't get another marshmallow. But if you don't eat the marshmallow, you're given 2. Yeah. Right. And so it's this whole idea of delayed gratification, candy. And maybe they were even told, if you don't eat the marshmallow, you're going to get 2. I don't remember that part exactly. But what they did is, I think it's some sort of longitudinal study, and they found that those kids who delayed that gratification were, tended to have higher life outcomes in across a variety of measures. So I think kind of standard classic experiment, and you know that idea of being able to delay gratification, I think it's so hard to teach kids, right? I'm trying to teach it now.
I think it's hard to teach adults sometimes, and we have like to do that. I will tell you that delaying gratification is critical, at least it was for me, for having long-term career success, because, you know, and we can go into that and talk about that later. But I think if you don't mind, my elementary school advice would be, it's so funny because there are themes that go between both of us. Mine would be, the first is, be aware, have knowledge that the adults in your life at that time are not representative of the world at large. So I actually lived, my childhood was actually very chaotic, and it was, I lived in 5 different households as a kid. Various family members moved around states, lived in Utah for a while. Had kind of these short, pseudo parental relationships with lots of people, and many of them really didn't. I mean, some of them were really good to me. A handful of them, couple, maybe 2, but the rest were not. And so I think I would definitely say, like, hey kid, hey little Jake, these adults that are in your life right now, and they're kind of come and go, they're not representative of the world at large. The world at large is actually better than what the adults that you're dealing with now. And also kind of as part of that, I would advise my young self to seek out more trustworthy adults, and like teachers and people that, that were active in other organizations. There were times whenever they would ship me off to like different churches. And, there were, they would, depending on who I was living with at the time, would send me off to camp for the summer to get me out of the, house for a couple of weeks or whatever. And so in those circumstances, seek out those adults, because there really is, when you're a kid, you don't know how big and diverse the world is.
Yeah. I mean, it's really critical. So I used to be in the nonprofit fundraising world. One of the organizations I worked for was in the child welfare space, and one of the kind of key lines, right, and going to speak with church groups or other groups who would want to hear about the kind of work we're doing is, the need for children to have a variety of strong connections with adults who are trustworthy. Like,
that's right.
Those multiple threads, because at any point, if one of those threads get cut, right, and there's only one or two threads, what happens, right? So you got a ball hanging in the air. If it's got 10 threads that are strong to a variety of things, one or two of those can get cut, and you're just fine, right? You got one or two or three, and one gets cut. There's a lot of instability there, and that's really challenging for kids.
So I was just looking. I had my calculator out, and I was calculating something because like so after all that kind of elementary school childhood, those challenges, if I go back and do an estimate of like afterwards, after that, how much money I spent with a psychologist in therapy in order to kind of become more healthy after having a challenging childhood like that, it's like $30,000.
Wow.
Like my that cost me $30,000 as an adult, roughly, in order to do the therapy required to become a healthy human being, emotionally, psychologically, and all that. Like after having had kind of a weird, unstable, chaotic childhood.
Jake, is it too soon for me to say? I mean, maybe you should ask for your money back. Just kidding.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's so true. You sound like my wife. Like, honey, we need to get your money. Like, you're still nuts. You're still crazy.
It's like, it's, you got to make the right level investment for this to solve the right size problem, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's, trying to upsell. Sorry, sales guy talk, right? Trying to upsell you.
I know. I didn't write it. I guess I didn't write it a big enough check on that deal. I don't know.
Just kidding. That's great return on investment.
Yeah.
What about after elementary in high school, right? So did things change significantly by then, or is it a lot of the same kinds of thoughts for you at that time?
Kind of like going into high school, it's going to be, I would say, a number of them. The first is going to be just be selective about whose opinion you value. And that's something I think that's, I know a lot of kids, a lot of people would say, and I think it's really common, kids that are in high school, when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, you really care about everything your peers think. And I think that's common, but I know that I went to school with some kids who had such a strong sense of who they were, that were so grounded that it didn't really bother them very much. Like they were not so concerned about like what people may have thought of them, what their classmates were. I think that's one. And there was a point in life, in my adult life, where I kind of started to lose that sense. And then there was a point at which I didn't care what anybody thought, with the exception of maybe like who I was married to and a couple other people. That's not good either, by the way. When you don't GAF anybody about anybody or anything, that's almost as bad as caring about what everybody thinks. I definitely would say in high school, make more friends too. I would tell young Jake in high school, young 16-year-old kid, make more friends, make more friends, a variety of friends. I got real insular in high school with like just a handful of really good relationships, like good solid friends, like a group of 4 or 5. I had a girlfriend, same girlfriend almost entire time of high school, which brings me to the last piece of advice I would give my high school self. Be aware and behave according to this fact. And the fact is, you are ultimately not going to marry your high school sweetheart. So those are mine.
Those are pretty good. You know what's interesting, as we've kind of talked through this, a lot of ours are pretty different. I think for the high school ones, they're very, very similar.
Really?
Yeah. So, try not to be so insular, be more open and think very hard about whose opinion you value. I mean, I think those are really, really kind of good overall, but then also that they certainly would apply to me. Right. And not being, fixated. A lot of my early life, I was very fixated on, finding finding stability in my own, like whatever my new family would be. Right. I move out and like have a family immediately. That was like really like, it wasn't like anyone preached that to me, but it was just in my head. It was a desire of mine. Right. And so having patience around that was really hard. So the key difference between our stories, right, was at the end of my high school years, I decided I was going to go into ministry. And I think my advice to my younger self would have been, that's fine to think about that, but also like take some business classes, and you're really good at math and science, like stick with math and science too, like be a more well-rounded person. I think a lot of those experiences I had kind of preparing to go into ministry were really, really good for me. They were awesome. And all of that. However, I was so sure of myself and so focused on a certain path and got a lot of really good encouragement around that path, that I really denied some of the other things I was really good at. Right. So like I tested out of all the math and science for college. I took one like it was in the gen ed curriculum, essentially like science, technology, and society class. But other than that, I tested all in college. Right. Yeah. And so like there probably could have been a lot of good classes I could have taken along that line if I had kind of stuck with it. So more general direction, right? Than deciding as an 18-year-old, that's what I'm going to do and forsake all else.
And when you say that, that's kind of, I feel the same way as well. I hadn't even thought about it, but there are some areas, kind of that road not taken, that I look back and go, man, there's some other things that I would have liked to have spent some time on and paid attention to that I didn't. And frankly, some people, like I mentioned, like in mine before, talking about, making more friends, just like there's some people that I think were really super interesting that for whatever reason, just because I was a snob, I guess, that, I just didn't really get to know. And that's I think my biggest high school regret actually really is just things and people that you just didn't end up, you look back on and go, man, that was a really interesting situation or interesting topic or an interesting person that was very cool to talk to. And then maybe know them now. Like I knew a couple of people that I was kind of maybe didn't know that well in high school, but I knew them. They were acquaintances. And now I know them a little bit better. And I'm like, man, you're awesome. Like, why weren't we friends in high school? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're like, because Jake, you're an asshole. I was like, oh yeah. Okay. That's right. Yeah. Forgot. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, that should be on the list too. Try not to be an asshole.
Try not to be an asshole. Yeah.
Try not to be an asshole as much. Maybe
I feel
a little
like
bit.
That's universal. Like that's from from birth to death, like the good piece of advice, try not to be an asshole.
And why is it hard, Jake? Why are we assholes sometimes, right?
Because it's human nature. Human nature is, I was having deep thoughts about this. I believe that it's in our human nature. It is evolutionary that we are, that we have a degree of self-centeredness, that we're selfish in some ways. Like we are.
Wow. Are you Presbyterian by origin?
That's funny. Is that in?
Oh yeah. TULIP. TULIP is the acronym to remember some of the essential theological concepts of Calvinism, I think. And the T in TULIP, the first one is total depravity. We are totally depraved. We are unable to save ourselves. And there's, So
I don't think, I mean, I guess I'm not a Presbyterian. The joke that I make is I'm a Budo Methodist.
Oh yeah.
I'm a Methodist with Buddhist tendencies.
That's me too.
You're a Budo Methodist. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. With a little bit like a little Tao Budo Methodist.
There you go. And I think the problem for me, is that the Methodists don't claim me, and the Buddhists definitely don't claim me. So,
too many experiences and thoughts to share anyone at this moment.
All right, so let's move on.
We'll have an episode on that.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So what about in college? So
what was yours in college?
So I was a very serious, intense student. And so I did really well in college. I had really, really great, as I said earlier, 3.5 years of college. But the thing I would tell myself is not to be in as much of a hurry. Yeah. Right. And the advice that like I'd give myself is the advice that, people would give me. Right. And I just somebody probably gave me that advice. I'm pretty sure I heard it and I didn't listen to it. Right. Which is, have fun. These 4 years are going to go by really fast, right? You're never going to have a time like this again. But I also worked really darn hard. And this is absolutely true. I worked really hard during college. I had a full tuition scholarship. I was an RA for 2 years. But I worked almost every single semester of college. I worked 2 jobs and did class full time, and I graduated in 3.5 years.
Wow.
Because I did all that and I lived really cheap, I graduated with more at zero debt and more cash in my bank account than I had at any period over the next an embarrassing number of years, right? Because I had almost no expenses and I didn't spend much. And I worked really sticking hard. So I was able to save and do some really good things. And then a lot of life happened right after college and took me a while to build back up to where I was at that point. But so a lot of those things are really good, but maybe go to fewer classes, and have a few more parties. Yeah.
Yeah, I can. Mine's the opposite, as you know. I was in college for 6 years. Like my undergraduate degree, like I told you, I got like the easiest bachelor degree because I just had to get a bachelor's degree. And
you got one of those experimentals. You've heard about MRS degrees, right? You got one of those MR degrees, right?
Yeah, kinda. Yeah. Yeah, kind of. I got truth of the matter is what I got is a BEER degree.
Summa cum laude, I'm sure, especially laude.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. And so my advice to my younger self, my college self would be go to damn class more. Like seriously, go to class. Because if you go to class, like college for me, because it was such an easy degree, college for me was literally, if I'd just gone to class, paid a little bit of attention, wrote a few notes, I would have not had a 2.6 GPA. I probably could have managed a 3.2, just by going to a few more classes. And I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, I also would say like now is because being in business, that I really wish that I would have taken some more business classes. Like the degree, the minor that I got, the reason that I got the minor that I got is because because of the way that the scheduling worked, I ended up already having 2 of the classes needed of the 5 for the minor. So I just went ahead and took the other 3. And my minor is the history of science. And there were 5 courses that you had to take, 5 3-hour courses. So 15 hours.
Gosh, that's awesome.
I got 2 B's. I got B's in 2 of the classes and I got D's in 3 of them. So if you do the math on that, let's do the math on that. That's 3 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. That is 9 divided by 5 classes. That is a 1.8 GPA in my minor. I should have been a business minor, You should
have been a business minor.
I really should have. And that's for real. So the other one in college, like the Jake now, the old Jake would tell the young collegiate Jake when he's just starting college to hang out with the international students.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do any of that and it kind of, you got like a taste for it and you wish you would have done it more, or did you do none of it and now you wish?
What happened was afterwards, when I was out of college, I had a job. It wasn't a very good job, whatever. Meaning it wasn't a very well paying job, but I had a job. And I think one of my colleagues I was hanging out with, who was maybe a year younger than me and still had friends at the same university that I went to, University of Oklahoma. And so he invited me to a party that they had that one of these, it's like that basically it was one of the international student club parties. I showed up at this party and it was, when I was in college, I went to some really good parties. This was by far better than any of them. The international students know how to get down.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun. And I met a lot of really interesting people. And it's like, wow, you guys are way different. I mean, it's just new experiences, new people, new languages, new cuisine. And I think it was that experience that actually sort of turned me on to travel and really be interested in other cultures. And so ultimately it was the beginning of me kind of learning additional languages, or one additional language rather than English, was just that experience of like, wow, this is something I've never seen before. This whole scene is like, not where I came from, and it's super cool, and I just want to be part of it.
And there's something really special, I think, about those kinds of communities in a college setting as well, because there's such a tight bond of people who are away from home.
Yep.
So they want to recreate that aspect of home.
Yep.
So they're very intentional about it. Mm-hmm. And so when you can come in and participate and help and maybe support that in some ways, right? By being an outsider who man, that's a pretty special thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if the Pan American Club at the University of Oklahoma still puts on kick-ass parties, but in my mind, how I imagine it should be is that they throw the best parties on campus. That's really awesome. Off campus, but like they're better than the Greek parties. Like those are the parties.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you? So do you want to move on? Well, young professional.
Yeah, young professional.
We're kind of right now. We're sort of mid-career. You're mid-career. I'm sort of looking at the late career potentially. What would a mid-career Mike right now? What would he say to his early young professional self?
What's really interesting is, I'm 35, but I've really done about 4 or so really distinct professions.
Yeah.
And in general, like did pretty well, like at 4 distinct professions.
Yeah.
In those respective kind of fields. So I was in the ministry world. I taught high school. I was a nonprofit fundraiser, and now I do software sales. Right. And I did a couple other little things sprinkled in here and there. But I never worked at, I've never worked at any company for more than 2 years, like any individual company. My first nonprofit job was a little bit over 2 years, but like 25 months or something like that. Right. So, and one of the things that my, mentors would say would be to, stick with things, don't change too much. Right. And all the rest of that. And there was some, there's some external factors why I really, really wanted, in some cases really needed to make changes at each one of these times every 2 years, right? There's some financial things, right, where you just got a significantly better situation and like just makes a whole lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
To do that. My wish for kind of going back would be, is there one of these situations where you can hang out longer, right? And have the experience? Because one of the things that I think that I've been good at is I can come in and bring ideas, and because especially now, because I've done a whole bunch of different kinds of things, I can see things, I think, with a decent perspective. Yeah. And then come in with some ideas and try new things and get going. And so what I really want the experience of now at this point in my life is, and so having this in younger would be really helpful, is seeing years 3, 4, 5, 6, like what happens when you push a ball down a hill and then you keep watching it roll, and then you do longer term tweaks, right? And then continue to innovate, right? And then push new things down the hill, so to speak, right? And see that whole ripple effect. That's the one thing I'm excited about now at my stage in my career. And so, that would be my advice. Is there one of those situations where you can figure out a way to make it work to stick around longer, so you can possibly have kind of a deeper impact and potentially, even expertise in a certain field or area. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's kind of the advice. That would be the thing that I would think through, and being a young professional, right? The older version of me coming to the younger version of me, right? That younger version is going to have some pushback. No. Here's why, right? These things need to happen. So maybe the overall advice would be receptive to advice, right? Yeah. Step one, right? Be receptive to advice. Step one. And then, now that you're receptive to advice, let's have a conversation about what's going to be important in the future. And, let's see if you can not eat this marshmallow today and get, 20 in a week. Right.
Sure. It doesn't surprise me. It's kind of fun. It doesn't surprise me that I didn't know this, but that really a little over 2 years in your career is the longest that you've had. That doesn't surprise me, but I don't mean that in a bad way at all. It's that I feel like that just knowing you and seeing you from you to see yourself as you are with your own eyes, we all have blind spots about ourselves, and it's hard for us because we're so self-involved. It's really hard to have objectivity. I feel like when I think about kind of you and your personality and your habits and your kind of the way you go about your professional life is that you need a lot of sky, man. And I think some people are that way. I'm that way too. And that's a good thing, because, if we're working in a situation or a scenario where we've already flown as high as we can fly, and all we're doing is just hitting the ceiling, there are some people that really like that like that stability. Like, we're going to go in a straight line, or we're going to keep our altitude steady. We're going to be very steady. And those are great people to have on your team, and they're good folks. But some of us need a lot of sky. Like when we hit that ceiling, when we're bumping up against the ceiling, it's time for us to bust through the ceiling. And if we don't have an opportunity to do that where we are now, we got to find that opportunity, because we're restless. We won't be happy. And the world needs both kinds of people. Like the world needs people that need sky above them to ascend, and the world needs people who understand and are really happy holding steady, like holding things steady. So, I mean, that's kind of how I read it from the outside, probably an oversimplification, but it doesn't surprise me. And I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah. I appreciate everything you just said there. And the one thing I would add on to my young professional story is, there's some things that I feel like did really right at that stage in my career, in which is I was very, very intentional about identifying some mentors and folks who were older than me, who I did go to for advice. Right. And maybe I didn't listen to it perfectly all the time, but I made it an active habit and ritual in particular. Kind of my mentor, especially in that first early phase of my nonprofit career, I would go and buy him breakfast, once a month. Right. And then we would take turns, right. Who's picking up the tab this time. Right. And it was at that early point, being a young nonprofit professional, where like going to buy somebody breakfast, it was line them in the budget, right? Like you thought about that and you planned for it very intentionally, right? And so it meant a whole lot more in some ways than necessarily would later on. But it was a very intentional act. But that habit of finding somebody who's at a different spot, listening to them, thinking about the things that they care about, the theme right now is what we give it. But part of the advice would be do that, keep doing that.
Yeah.
Right. That was really good. Don't stop that.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah. What about, did you already share your young professional advice?
No, it's minor. Okay. So here's mine. It's the first is the actual education for your career is just now beginning. As a young professional out of college, your education is actually just now beginning, which would be the case no matter what, because I didn't go to damn class in college, so it doesn't really matter. But that is true. I learned more like on the job. And I think this is pretty universal, but I mean, I just learned more on the job than I learned, than I ever learned in college. College was great. And there were some classes I really loved and enjoyed. I had a multicultural communication course with the most interesting professor, a guy named Phil Lujan, who was an attorney and tribal judge for, I think, Kiowa tribe. And one of the best, awesome professors. I went to that class, mainly because it was in the afternoon and I could, it was the morning classes mainly that I missed. The other one I would say is don't get in a hurry. Like I was such in a hurry to establish myself as in a career. I think coming from a background, kind of a more humble background and a more chaotic background really, really motivated me. And I think it still motivates me to have, frankly, financial success, because when you can have that financial success, you can have that flexibility. It brings with it the freedom to be able to be healthier. Like it's hard to remain psychologically, emotionally, and physically healthy when you don't have a lot of money, a lot of resources. Just not easy. And just savor the experience. You're only going to be, this is pablum. This is like total, stereotypical answer, but just savor the experience. You're not going to, youth is wasted on the young. I had so much energy when I was like 25 years old. I had so much energy. I could go all day and all night, do anything I wanted to do. And now almost more than 20 years later, I'm like, not so much on my reach out. What is it? What is it? I don't know this damn phrase is. My reach is bigger than my grasp, or grass is bigger than my reach, whatever. It's like I can envision more in my head than I can actually physically execute right now because I'm just older.
Your eyes are bigger than your stomach.
That one too. And my eyes are really big. And that actually takes me to my last one, was take better care of your body.
Yeah, no, that is a good one. Yeah. Well, oh man, I had a really great thought and then it went away. So now I'm calling it out to make it really fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So anything else from being a young professional, any kind of tie a bow on it comments? I mean, I would be curious, what do you feel like you did right?
Oh, I mean, I did some things right. Oh gosh, as a young professional, probably I would say that sticking to something for a good amount of time before, and then being deliberate about making changes. This kind of goes back to what you were talking about kind of the 2-year thing. Like I really out of college wanted to be I wanted to be the next, big radio personality. I was an on-air radio personality right out of college. That's what I did. And, I was making barely minimum wage, like just a little bit more. My last on-air radio job was in Wichita, Kansas on the new 105.3 The Buzz retro to right now. Hey, here's an Uncle Kracker song that I just played 9 times earlier today. That was the job that I loved. I wanted to do that for a living. And then just the truth of the matter is that's to be that person and to actually have the kind of career success that I envisioned in my head was like a 1 in a million shot. And that industry, that terrestrial radio industry, was shrinking so quickly and still is. Like it's significantly smaller. There's not a lot of opportunity. I moved over and I made the deliberate choice. I got married and I'm like, I got material needs now. Like I got to make more than $8 an hour. That's when I moved over actually and started my sales career. And I did that. And that's another one too, where I did it for a while. I got reasonably good at it. And then I kind of realized that I was a little bit I was not in the right place. I wasn't selling the right thing for myself and ended up in a management job. And then, I could go on and I'm not going to, but I think it probably the things I got right is I did make moves that I thought out and were strategically, conceived. And a lot of it had those moves. A lot of those had to do with, frankly, the very best decision that I ever made in my entire life was I married the right person.
There you go.
So, yeah, because she really helped me. Like she helped me. She is the kind of, because I'm like all over the place. I'm like in the clouds and I'm sideways and I'm like all crazy and she's very grounded. And so she's like, I'm like a kite flying in the wind and I'm all exciting. And she's the string kind of bringing me back in going, Jake, come back. You're flying too close to the sun, Jake. Your wings are going to melt.
You know what's interesting about that?
What's that?
In The Tale of Icarus, in Flying Too Close to the Sun, everyone remembers the part, don't fly too close to the sun or the wax will melt or whatever and you'll fall.
Yeah.
The other aspect of it is don't fly too close to the water. Because if you fly too close to the water, you'll get caught up in a wave or something and you'll drown as well.
Yeah.
And so the idea is not to go too high or too low. And when we tell that story, I think most of the time we think about don't fly too high,
right?
But it's also important. Don't sell yourself short.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important lesson too. You know, it's interesting. The only other thing I'll say about the young professional aspect was about 5 or 6 years ago, you could say I got caught or became enamored with the entrepreneurial bug.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got to, hear about people who are entrepreneurs and all the rest of that. And that ultimately led me to kind of moving into kind of the sales world full time in this kind of a role where in many ways you have a whole lot more to, ability to determine your own destiny, to use a hackneyed idiom.
It's true though.
Right. But you have a whole lot more ability to control what's going to happen. And so that's been a key part of like that advice to my young professional self as well, because I had all those little nuggets of being entrepreneurial and doing entrepreneurial things, but I didn't think about myself that way.
Yeah.
I had kind of a little bit of a mind trap in how I was thinking about what I would do and how I would do it and the kind of work I would do, instead of understanding and listening, like what really motivates me, what really gets me excited. Well, it's these things that I do on the side that I kind of feel bad about, but it's the stuff I really like. Lean into that. I
couldn't agree more. And the entrepreneurial life, speaking of ups and downs and too high and too low, can be really crazy. Mm-hmm. It can be, the highs can be really high and the lows can be awful. I think if you're a person in that life, a person listening, if you're in that life or considering an entrepreneurial style career in life, you got to be ready for those highs and lows. And I'm very thankful for the 10 years and $30,000 I spent in therapy, in psychotherapy with a psychologist in order to deal with that, because that's my day every day now. But I'll tell you that I would choose no other life.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely, man. Jake, this has been fun, man.
Super fun. Oh my gosh. So so the next one, we'll have another similar question like this. We'll have another good kind of, really interesting question to talk about. I think we got a week to figure that out. If you've got anybody listening has suggestions about that, feel free to hit us up. LinkedIn.com/in/Slack. Mike is Mike. How you get in touch with Mike Slack. Again, LinkedIn.com/in/Slack Mike. For me, it's on Twitter. And the fun one is at Jake Fisher, just at Jake Fisher, my name. The Joke Fisher is actually the name of the account. That's the name, my actual name.
I don't even follow your official one. Does anyone follow the official one? Come on.
No, nobody does. The only reason I have it is because when people ask, well, you got a Twitter account? I'm like, yeah, it's, Jake Fisher OFCL, because I put a lot of I put jokes on there. Like, it's not a professional, like, it's not about my job or it's not about who I am. It's literally just like random thoughts that I think are funny or interesting, is all it is. So the Talky podcast, we are online. We have a website. It's talkytalkypod.com, and you can find us, on the Apples and the world and the whatever, the what are they called? The YouTubes. We're on the YouTubes. We're on the Apples. We're on the Spotify's.
I think what we say is where all the finest podcasts are found.
And some of the not so fine as well.
And some of the other ones as well.
That was fun, Mike.
All right. Had a great time. Thanks, Jake.
You too, buddy. See ya.